Now with your evening headlines, it's the ITV News.
Hello, welcome to a shorter edition of Lookaround because of the World Cup coverage. The UK's highest court has ruled that the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to hold a second independence referendum without Westminster's consent. Nicola Sturgeon described the judgment as a hard pill to swallow, but within hours of the ruling, the First Minister promised to turn the next general election into a vote on Scotland leaving the Union. In a moment, we'll cross live to our correspondents in London and in Edinburgh, but before that, here's Matty Sutton's report on today's events.
Disappointed but defiant. Outside the Scottish Parliament, hours after the court's ruling, activists answered the First Minister's call to step up their campaign. Earlier, their hope that Holyrood would get the green light to hold a referendum were dashed at the Supreme Court.
The Scottish Parliament does not have the power to legislate for a referendum on Scottish independence.
That means Nicola Sturgeon can't hold her planned poll on the 19th of October next year.
That is a hard pill for any supporter of independence, and surely indeed for any supporter of democracy to swallow. So this ruling confirms that the notion of the UK as a voluntary partnership of nations, if it ever was a reality, is no longer a reality.
Instead, she launched a campaign to fight the next UK general election on the single issue of independence.
This is no longer just about whether or not Scotland becomes independent, vital though that decision is. It is now more fundamental. It is now about whether or not we even have the basic democratic right to choose our own future. Indeed, from today, the independence movement is as much about democracy as it is about independence.
Her party's partners in government, the Greens, confirmed votes for them would count towards the pro-independence result at the next election. At Westminster, Rishi Sunak welcomed the court's decision.
We respect the clear and definitive ruling of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. And I think that the people of Scotland want us to be working on fixing the major challenges that we collectively face, whether that's the economy, supporting the NHS, or indeed supporting Ukraine. Now is the time for politicians to work together, and that's what this government will do.
It's not fair, is it?
It's totally unfair.
In Dumfries, these activists said the ruling wouldn't crumple the campaign.
My view is that it's going to strengthen the Scottish independence movement.
It's up to Nicola to galvanise the independence movement, and it's up to everyone who cares about Scotland to want to say, even if you're against it.
But in an area which voted against independence in 2014, Christmas shoppers gave their own verdicts on the court's decision.
Correct. Shouldn't get independence.
I'm disgusted. I don't think that we should be held to ransom. I feel that we should be able to make our own decisions.
I did vote to break away, but since it's come back round, I think we should stay now.
I'm quite disappointed that Scotland aren't allowed to hold another referendum.
The First Minister has said she'll bring SNP members together for a special conference next year to decide how best to fight their cause at the next general election, making clear that while the legal battle may be lost, the political campaign carries on. Matty Sutton, ITV News.
We're going to go now to our political correspondent Tom Sheldrick, who is outside the Supreme Court in London. Tom, the court's judgment today perhaps didn't come as much of a surprise.
Yes, Ian, this ruling was widely expected. The judges decided that holding a referendum would have significant consequences relating to the Union and therefore was beyond the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Indeed, we were told that the judgment came back quickly because they were unanimous on that. It is 6 weeks since legal arguments were presented here. We have had a change of Prime Minister in that time, and Rishi Sunak is being more friendly towards the Scottish Government, but he is no more likely, I think, to agree to another referendum. There are a small number of pro-independence campaigners here this evening. Across the road in Parliament earlier, SNP MPs lined up to question the Prime Minister and the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack, but they had pretty familiar responses, particularly that the UK government think it's right at the moment to focus on the economy and other more day-to-day priorities they say that Scottish voters have. So while the question of independence has very much been on the agenda at Westminster today, I think that ministers here will feel pretty confident it won't be bothering them much in the months ahead.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. From England's capital, we're going to go to Scotland. We can go live outside the Scottish Parliament, where Peter McMahon is waiting for us. Peter, pro-independence supporters have gathered there, I gather. What is the mood like, and what are the challenges now for the First Minister and the SNP?
It's lively here, saltires and bagpipes. The rally's still going on behind me just now. Several hundred pro-independence campaigners and a much smaller group of pro-UK campaigners. Now, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, within the last hour has addressed it. She said this wasn't just about independence, she said it was also about democracy, Scotland's democracy. But today she talked about not an independence referendum, but what she called a de facto independence referendum in the next UK election. High risk for the First Minister, because UK elections can be about all sorts of issues. For example, who's going to be in Downing Street. Nicola Sturgeon will have been First Minister when that election takes place for 10 years. A lot at stake for Scotland, the UK and Nicola Sturgeon.
Peter McMahon in Edinburgh, thank you very much indeed. And of course, Peter will have more on today's Supreme Court ruling in tonight's Representing Border. Viewers in Scotland can see that just after 11:05 tonight. The parents of a student who